Hey there, listener. Corey Andrew Powell here, and I'm excited to share that Motivational Mondays is now sponsored by BetterHelp. Feeling stressed or anxious? Well, BetterHelp brings you online therapy that's convenient and affordable. NSLS members get 50% off your first month of BetterHelp when you sign up at betterhelp.com/NSLS or click the link in the show notes. Start your journey to better mental health today. Hello, everyone. I am Corey Andrew Powell, and welcome to another episode of Motivational Mondays presented by the NSLS, now motivating over 2 million students nationwide. Now, of course, here we bring you inspiring voices to help you live with passion and purpose and perseverance. And today is no exception as we welcome Arlene Pellicane, a renowned marriage and parenting expert, an author and a speaker, and the host of the Happy Home podcast. She's appeared on major platforms like The Today Show, Wall Street Journal, Family, Focus on Family, Fox and Friends, and more. And she's also the national spokesperson for National Marriage Week. So she's about to release her new book, which is coming up, called Making Marriage Easier, on February 4th. And we thought Valentine's Day would be really interesting and sort of apropos time to bring her on to talk about her work. So please welcome to the show, Arlene Pellicane. Welcome.
Hey, so good to be with you, Corey. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it is my pleasure. And what I love about a lot of the work you do is, first I thought we have these images of
Yep.
marriage, right? From TV, the romanticized view. It's always mostly perfect and sunny side of the street. And it's work, really. If you're really interested in making sure it's a healthy institution. So I get some of that, I think, from your work. But let's just start with your journey. What inspired you to become a passionate advocate for marriage and family life?
Yeah, I was growing up, Corey, with the same ideals like you were talking about. And I will say, when I was growing up in the 80s, you would see more like husbands and wives portrayed like in TV in a good way, right? And you'd be
Mhm.
like, oh, that's really nice. Where today, maybe it's like, oh, your husband and wife, that's a drag. That's bad. You know what I mean? Like it has shifted a little bit. But I very much wanted to be
Right.
married, So I'm growing up like, oh, I want to be married. I want to have kids. And that was a pretty normal way to think. I was not weird in that. Like a lot of people
Mhm.
wanted to do that. So when I hit my 20s, when I graduated from college, when I hadn't gotten that MRS degree and all this kind of stuff, right? I was like, oh man. And so it took for me, I was in my late 20s, which at that time felt late, which I know now would be completely normal, right? Like
Mm.
you wouldn't think anything of it. So I met someone in graduate school and he was flipping hamburgers at the student event. And I did it, I was just like, well, that was nice. And then there was this nursing home outreach where once a month, some students would go to the nursing home and visit the residents and
Mm.
like tell stories and read books and like spend time with them. So I thought, well, that is great. I want to do that. So that's where I met him again. So I met this guy named James and I was like, wow. And it was really sweet, Corey, because years later he would be like, I was hoping the kind of girl that would come like to a nursing home ministry, right, would be the kind of girl I would want to marry. So it's
Right.
like you had me at Jello, this kind of thing. And basically we were friends for a very long time. And then finally, I liked him first. I don't know, women, is that our thing? Like we tend to like the man and then the man's like, I don't know, it's commitment, it's a big thing,
Well, yeah, the guy's
right?
usually scared is
He's
pretty much
scared,
the
and
issue,
he
yeah.
was scared, and then but once he, hit the button, it was the go signal, and so we got married, and we've been married for 26 years,
Oh,
and we have
wow.
really been very happily married, like, when you look back on it, if someone asked about my marriage, I'm not gonna be like, "Well, it's mostly bad, but a little bit good." No, it
Mm.
is, like, mostly good, and
Mhm.
we disagree on things, that's where there are 2 of us, we have the normal annoyances of living with someone all the time,
Right.
but I really could look back at the 26 years and say, I love being married. I
Mm.
love I just love it. I love this team. I love this partnership. I love that we were able to have a family and have 3 children. And I love this. Like I love being a mom. So this idea, Corey, of just like, this is the joy of my life, to be
Mm.
married, to have children, not to be like, oh, they're a toddler now. They're such a pain. Oh, they're a teenager now.
Yeah.
I'm so irrelevant. Oh, now they're young adults. They're like mooching me. They're
All the
just sucking on
cliches,
all the
right?
things,
Yeah.
right? It's like, wait a minute. No, this has been very much not my experience. So how can I encourage others to be able to live with this kind of joy? Because I am not a superhero. I'm not crazy. So there must be something that we're just missing. So that's why I'm trying to help people to do through the Happy Home podcast and through books like 31 Days to a Happy Husband and my newest book, which is Making Marriage Easier, because that's what I want to do. When people look at getting married, instead of thinking, which automatically comes in your mind, wow, that would be hard.
Yeah.
Right. To switch that, to shift that, to say, wait a minute, don't you think growing up alone through your 30s, 50s, 70s, might that be hard? Right. And then making that commitment to someone to have and to hold forever, that's kind of a cool thing. Right. So it's like that makes life a lot easier. So once you have committed to marriage, instead of thinking, wow, this is so hard, my husband's not doing this, blah, 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 to how can we switch that? How do we make this easier? And I think of Greg McKeown and essentialism and effortless. And, in effortless, he asks this question, like, how can we make this easier? And that's what I really want to do in Making Marriage Easier, is help people ask this question. Okay, what are we always bumping up against, and how can we make this work better?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, that is profound. And I think there's multiple layers to it, though, right?
Yeah.
Because you got lucky, I would say. I mean, some people would argue that it's not luck. Some people
Yeah, I
argue
might push against you, but let me hear you out.
Okay,
Let me hear you out.
Yes, hear me out. Hear me out. And I don't mean luck in the fact that like, you just
Yeah.
happen to like have met like the one good
Yes.
guy left in the universe, but I mean lucky enough to have met the person who is
Sure.
likely compatible with you
I will take that.
for the
Yes.
long haul, right?
Yeah.
Because we all are initially smitten and we think it's the
Yeah.
right person. And very often the people are not always putting forth who they really are in the beginning. So you can have a facade of who you think is the right person. So that's what I meant by that.
No, and in that way, I will completely accept that. Yes, I'm lucky to have met that person. And I just want to say this caveat is time really helps. Like, so I knew James for 2 years before we got married. Some might think that's too short, some might think it's too long, whatever. But time does help because you have more chances for the person to reveal who they are. Let them get mad, like see them, when they get mad,
Right.
what do they get mad about? And how do they, right? Let all that happen. And if you don't see any of that, wonder like, wait a minute, what's going on? What are they like with their family of origin? That's a very good and telling thing. What are your closest friends and family members saying? Sometimes, love is blind. So we don't know. Right. But if all of your family and all of your friends are like, this person, it's not good for you. Make that decision. Like, I will listen to this counsel, because all of those things are really, really important.
That is so good. I love that part of it because very often, you hear the stories and it can work out, but we just got married last week. I just met him on Tuesday. And I'm like, girl, for real? Are you sure about that? Yeah. I mean, because all those things, I think 2 years personally, that's a good time frame. You get to see the range of emotions. I love how you mentioned, what do they get mad at? Because very often, you don't know if you're marrying someone who's abusive, and they could fly off the deep end over the simplest things. And a lot of times women and men ignore those things when they see them.
My husband has a great saying: when someone shows you who they are, believe them.
Yeah, famous quote.
Right? So it's like because we justify like, oh, they're probably just having a bad day. It was just like a thing, but it's like, no, believe them. They're going to reveal who they are. And that's what you're looking for. You're looking for someone who you're like, wow, I could like you for the rest of my life. I could trust you, be comfortable, be secure around you. You make me laugh. We get each other, and we could decide to be together for all time. Yeah.
And you use a really great word there too, like the love word we all get. But I would tell you, in some ways is more powerful, because one of the examples I have is during the pandemic, when you began to read, and it was like a really serious thing. You began to read a high level of domestic violence happening when people were forced in a confined situation with their husband or their wife or their long-term partner, someone that you think you'd be fine with, confined in a space with. And you had all this rise in violence and domestic abuse because at the end of the day, some of those people probably realize, I don't even like this person.
It's terribly sad. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that was a realization for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So, so liking someone you're with
Yeah.
just on the basics, having a good time around them, they make you feel good. That's a powerful one. It goes a long way.
And character.
Mhm.
What does this person, what is the character? When they are wronged, what do they do?
Right.
When things don't go their way, what do they do? Are they honest even when it hurts them to be honest? All those things, they're
Mhm.
important.
Yeah. Now, typically, I always have my kind of questions that I have just as references, but the beauty of the show is once we start talking,
Yeah.
it's
Go,
organic.
hey, you want to talk about this?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it becomes organic, which is why hopefully is why people keep coming back and watching and listening. So, I will veer off script a little bit and just kind of stay on this. In your work, you are, of course, an advocate for marriage and for advocating for healthy marriages and easier marriages and sort of and putting in that work, if you will. So,
Yeah.
how does your work align with people who are in long-term relationships and they say, well, maybe marriage isn't for me? Are you making like a
Mhm.
discernment between those two
Yeah.
relationships or not?
Yeah. So every person listening, right? You at the end of the day are going to decide what you want to do. So please don't hear me and think like, oh, she's telling me I have to do this. I mean, these are the things that you need to do. But what we can say is that when through research, like they did, Brad Wilcox out of the University of Virginia, he does this national marriage project, finding out what makes people happy, right? Because so many of us are into that, right? We're just like,
Mhm.
okay, we want to be fulfilled. We want to be happy. What do we do? And so, what they found through the research was that if you get your college degree, you are 29% happier. If you have a higher income than most, you're 51% happier. If
Mhm.
you are married, just married, it doesn't have to be happily married, just plain married, you are 102% happier.
Hmm.
But if you're happily married, you are reporting a 219% boost in overall happiness.
Right.
And it is this idea when you are married versus being in a long-term relationship without being married. So is it just a piece of paper? Can't
Right.
we
You
make
hear
that same
those.
commitment
Yeah.
without it? When you are married, it has that security of we are really blending our two lives together. We are blending our things together. We're blending our home together. We're blending the title of our house together. Like all
Mm.
these things are blended together. And it is a more permanent type of structure to raise children. If you were to have children, things like that, that marriage does give a stability that cohabiting doesn't necessarily, like when they look at people that stay together, if they didn't live together and then they got married, they were more likely to stay together than
Mhm.
if they lived together and then they got married. And I
Right.
think part of it is the mindset of, hey, I'm going to do this as long as this is working. And then when it stops working, it's time to part ways.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not talking about an abusive situation. I'm just talking about like, hey, you don't make me sing like you used to, that
Right.
kind of thing,
Sure. Right.
you know?
Right.
So, but when you have, it's built on this commitment and this vow of, yes, we are going to get married. And yes, we do think that marriage is good for finances, for health, for child raising, as all those, like the research shows that it's positive for those things. Think
Mhm.
of communities. If you see communities and you're walking down the street and you see, parents and children and families, you feel safe.
Mhm.
It's a good thing for communities. And so sometimes without marriage, if you are long-term partners, maybe you're wondering, should we have children together? Should we not have children? It's a bit more complicated.
Right.
So,
There's more to
there's
consider.
more things like that
Mhm.
that are unknown.
Yeah. No, I understand that. I guess I just want to make sure that
Yeah.
in our conversation, we're not, disparaging anyone's relationship, which
Yes.
is why I love you said, hey, look, do what's good for you,
Yeah.
but here's sort of some
Something to
statistics that
consider. Yeah.
support. Right.
Yeah.
Right. For me, for example, my mother raised me as a single mom, and she and my
Mhm.
dad just did not work out.
Yeah.
Um, and despite the fact that she really wanted that to work out, it didn't. So
Mhm.
to me, it was normal. My construct of a normal
Y
household is like a strong woman holding it down
Yes.
without a man, and that's just normal to me. So I do wonder, like, how sometimes there's like, I think this, we all have our different ideology about what
Mhm.
is the normal household, and so I guess the status and statistics you're sharing, they're showing that there is one way, but they're not saying that the other ways aren't also going to yield positive results either. But
Right.
this is more proven. Is that
Yeah.
sort of more the idea?
Kind of, but let's think like for your mom, for instance. Obviously, you are a well-spoken, kind, wonderful human being,
Thank
and
you.
your
She
mother
put the work in. She put
and
the
your
work in.
mother did it, right? And it is putting in the work. And so single moms, single dads, they can definitely put in the work and just they're superheroes because
Mhm.
there's just one of them and they have to do
Mm.
both. So it is that idea that had your mom had it worked out with your dad and had your dad been an involved, loving dad and a loving husband, she'd probably think maybe, and you can ask her like, yeah, that might have been better for me if that happened,
Yeah,
right?
no,
You know
totally,
what I'm saying?
totally,
So
yeah.
that's like what we're trying to create is, okay, how can we have a husband and a wife stay together? How can we help them to stay in love the whole time for the whole
Mhm.
course?
Yeah.
How can we help that? How can we nurture that? And then obviously, how can we support single moms and dads around us because they're doing like a super amazing job?
Mhm.
Yeah, I have a friend. She's an author, Pam Farrell, and her husband, Bill, both came from very dysfunctional homes. And they decided, like, we want to stay married. And so they would sit next to, like, they'd go to church and they'd sit next to people that looked happily married and they were old. and they would say, can we take you to lunch?
Right.
And
Figure
they
it
would
out. Right.
learn and they
Yeah.
would learn, and so it is this idea that even though you weren't modeled, one thing I love to say on my Happy Home podcast is you don't have to come from a happy home to create one.
Mm.
You can have a happy home and like learn from the things that worked and didn't work in your family of origin. And that is work, like you're saying, because we just automatically go default into
Mm.
how we have been shown and how we've been raised. And we do have to kind of shift to say, wait a minute, I didn't like that about how
Yeah.
I grew up. I can actually change that. And that's freeing and really wonderful.
Mm. Yeah, I love that too, especially when it comes to the idea of like I had someone on the show recently, and she goes, if you want to be a billionaire, ask a billionaire how they did
Yes,
it.
that's
If you
right.
want to be a
That's right.
baker, go to a bakery and
That's
ask a
exactly right.
baker.
That's exactly right.
So ask an old couple who's been married for like
Yeah.
70 years, like how and I've witnessed it. Now, so on the flip side, my grandparents who are very prominent in my life, they both
Yeah.
were born in 1929, high
Mhm.
school sweethearts at 16,
Oh,
married, and that was it. And my grandmother, and she passed in 2000, and my grandfather never remarried, and he died 2 years ago
oh.
at
Yes.
93. But like
Right.
that was it for them, and
Yeah.
they found it, and they were like, all right. Yeah, he was like, he just pretty much watched football for the next 20 years after she passed. But
Yes.
so I saw both, sides of
Yeah.
that, and so I do get it. I like that. I did see the longevity and the security. They built a home with 5 children, and so
Yeah.
I saw both sides of that. Now, I do want to ask you about the idea of pursuing a lasting love, right?
Yeah.
The mission. So share a little bit about that.
Yeah, so National Marriage Week, it's every year from February 7th to 14th. And just think of kind of like ice cream day where you're like, yay, we love ice cream. So
Right,
this is
right.
like a week to be like, you know what? Let's shift our ideas about marriage, that this is something really good and to support. And even if you yourself are not quite sure where you stand with marriage, that you would think, but you know what? This is good for people. I'm for this. This is a great
Mhm.
idea. So, pursuing a lasting love when you have all, whether it's Princess Bride or whatever, right? And they get married and you're like, this is fantastic. They should stay together forever. To realize, okay, it's not going to be like a fairy tale. We get that. It's
Mm.
real,
Yeah.
but that I do can last till death do us part. Like that is a vow. It's not like a, sometimes now vows are like, you are like the sun to me. They don't really have a
Right. They
promise.
don't
They're
really have
just
a
more like
right. Long
they're just more
poems.
like, I really love you. You're like
Yeah.
amazing. But going back to pursuing a lasting love, like, no, on this day when I get married, I'm making a vow to you and it means something. Like
Mhm.
my word means something.
Right.
And unless you cheat on me or abuse me, I'm going to stay with you. You are
Mhm.
not going to be able to shake me,
Yeah, yeah.
So it is a commitment. So it is that idea, like bring that back. Like we
Mhm.
commit to things and we follow through with them and we think this is worth it and pursuing a lasting love. And, how do we do that? And
Mhm.
so I think it's a huge part of it is decision. and that you make it a commitment. And the thing is, when people are married for a while, then it's like they say, oh, well, he doesn't do what he used to do. She
Right, right.
doesn't do what she used to do. Right.
Mhm.
But then we always have to go back to like, wait a minute, we're the ones who picked this person.
Right,
We
right.
didn't pick Hitler. Like we picked someone really awesome.
Right. So they're in there
So
still
they're
somewhere.
in there. Exactly. And, in my book, Making Marriage Easier, one of the shifts, the decisions that were really helpful is like make the choice to serve your spouse. And that's super unpopular. Like, why would I serve them? I'm not a
Yeah.
servant. I
Yeah.
am an equal,
Mhm.
But the idea is that you're coming into the marriage with the idea of like, man, I'm going to come alongside of you and I'm going to support you. I mean, that's what you did when you chose them to get married. You're like, man, I'm in it with you. You wanted to climb that mountain. Let's go climb that mountain. You
Right.
want to, you're in the ditch. I'm going to help. You're in like, that's your attitude. So instead of asking, well, what have you done for me today? Right. Because that's what people are saying. Like, well, he doesn't do anything for me anymore. She doesn't do
Mhm.
anything for me anymore. Well, what have you done for them?
Right, right.
Lately.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
just that shift of you wake up in the morning and it's not, let me try what this crazy Arlene said to me. You wake up in the morning and say, honey, is there anything I can do for you today? And they might just say like, wow, that's really nice. I just could use a hug right now. Like,
Mhm.
great. It's the attitude, like I am here to serve you and not like you are here to serve me. Cause who wants that? Nobody wants to
Right.
be in a relationship where you're like, come, but you can give it. You don't demand it. You give it. So that
Mm.
shift really helps people to pursue a lasting love.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. It makes a difference too when you talk about the idea of serving. You're right. It got this
Yeah.
negative stigma, so you begin
Yeah.
to see marriage vows being sort of going from the old school that might have been a little far on the other way, where
Mhm.
it's like to honor and obey my husband, which was I think sort of where that rub came from with a lot of
Yeah.
women, and then it began to get modified, right? And now you're right,
Yes.
just like the stars and the moon and
Right, right.
like, are you gonna promise me anything? Are you
Right,
gonna be there
exactly.
when I'm sick or dying? Or it's just all the moon and the planet? So I get
For the
that
month.
part.
No, I'm kidding.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, that's because, because in sickness and in health specifically,
Yeah.
that is a big one,
Yeah.
because you really better be ready, God forbid, that the person you with, you love them, because if,
Mhm.
God forbid, something happens,
Yeah.
that's a real vow
Yes.
that you have to really make sure you're ready to do. So,
Yeah.
um,
And it's
I
the same,
yeah.
you'd want someone to be there for you, right? If
Mhm.
you got sick,
Yeah.
you'd want someone to be there for you.
Right, and that's the importance of, I think, again, picking. I mean, we can say we picked the right person, and that's sort of like, elusive, because you just never know, but you
Yeah.
hope you're making the right choice based on sort of like a checklist we've just
Yeah.
gone through of things you can do to
Yes.
at least get
And
close to
and I
knowing.
am a big fan of premarital counseling also, that you can
Mhm.
have counseling before you are married to see how you're compatible, to kind of push the little buttons, like, if this happened, what would you do?
Right.
And you might find out like, whoa, you don't want to have kids? You want to have 10? Oh,
Mhm.
you are a saver and I'm a spender. And you kind of at least can have those conversations
Yeah.
beforehand. I think that's really helpful too.
Yeah, 'cause I have seen couples like, so, 15 years in, and all of a sudden one of them wants to have kids after they
Right.
had not really, they realized that,
Yeah.
well, we never had that conversation. And
Yes.
one person, well, I'm a little old now. I don't want to be a dad at 50, you know.
Yes.
So, but those are conversations to kind of have earlier than later. So
Yeah.
that kind of stuff is really important. Um, I do wonder too, when it comes to the idea of being in a relationship or being married, do you think that some people feel obligated to do it just because of societal norms? It's expected of them, and that's what drives it. And if that's the case, I mean, should those people not do it if they really don't feel their heart is into it? I mean, maybe it goes back to what we were saying earlier, do what's good for
Yeah.
you, but just wonder, what does
I
society
I feel
project?
like society is more hesitant toward marriage. I don't think that and I don't, you're closer to this than I am. I feel like the average 20 something isn't saying like, oh, society is pressuring me to get married.
Mm,
I don't know that that is the case. The
mhm.
reason I say that is social media feeds are not filled with diamond ads and couples getting on their knees and proposing. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like, it's
yeah.
not really
That's
movies and
true.
television. Television isn't showing us, wow, the end of every single thing is that they got to the altar and they got married. So I
Mm,
would kind of like, I'd put a a caution there that I'm not sure that society is pushing young people to get married. I'd almost want to say I wish society would pull people more to get
Mhm.
married, to say that, hey, this is a really cool thing, because we see our grandmas and grandpas, right?
Right,
That you're
right.
talking about, that like, oh, they've been married 40 years. They've been very stable, part of my life. But we might not see our peers or people around us a lot getting married and being happily married. So I
Mhm.
think if you are getting married, as your original question was stating, like because you feel the pressure to get married, you can,
Mhm.
I feel 50-50 on that, because I feel like you should not do something for someone else, especially not get married. That's
Right.
going to be a really big decision, and you need to
Mhm.
do that for you. So on
Right.
that, let me just be clear, don't get married because your mom expects it. Don't get married because someone important in your life expects you to. No, you get
Mhm.
married because you think it's the right thing to do, and you're going to decide to get married.
Right.
On the same token, there are things in life we don't want to do. Like we might not want to get a job. You know what I mean? It's like we might
Yeah.
want to like stay
Stay
at mom and dad's
home.
house. Like
Yeah,
that
yeah.
kind of might be nice. And there are points in your life where the expectation is good, is
Hmm.
positive, that it does make you rise, because a generation or two ago it would be an expectation that I'm going to get a job,
Yeah.
I am going to get married, I am going to
Mhm.
have children. These were very normal processes of life. And I will tell you, as being married and as a mom, those things, they make you a better person. Like all of a
Mm.
sudden you have to share. All of a sudden
Oh,
you
yeah.
have to learn how to do things. You love beyond what you thought you were capable of loving. Like these are really beautiful things. You mature, you stop being as self-centered, because now you are kind of forced in this team, and right,
Mhm.
it makes you a better person. It
Yeah.
matures you in a way. For a man, like all of a sudden, wow, I am responsible to provide for this wife and these two children. And man, I'm going to man up and I'm going to succeed. Like those
Mhm.
kinds of things, those expectations, I think they're very positive expectations. And I hope I can be a voice to say these are hopeful expectations of like, hey, let's become more than
Yeah.
we are today, versus like, you better, do this, and
Yeah.
you better like do
Right,
this, and
right.
this bar is like this, and you better jump over it. But no, wait, like this is actually something really a beautiful thing I'm being called to do.
Yeah, and it's, very often when I talk to leaders, we talk a lot about just the shift in mindset, really,
Yes,
and
yes,
that's what that is. I mean, it's almost like,
yes.
if we're programming people to think that, marriage is like this icky thing
Yeah,
that, like, you're sacrificing yourself to give yourself to some person,
right.
which is kinda like the narrative you often
Yeah.
have versus, there's a lot of great stuff that comes along with that, and if you
Isn't
think
that
about the long term,
yes.
it's really nice,
Like
and
you would lose yourself if you get married.
right.
Like you're not going to be able to find yourself. They're going to just walk all over you, or you're just going to meld into something else. But to realize, wait a minute, no,
Mhm.
like you kind of find, I think, the opposite. Like when I married James and when I became a mom to Ethan, Noel, and Lucy, it's like I'm finding greater meaning in my life. I'm finding what makes me tick and what ticks me off. I am finding, like these are really, really good and beautiful things that
Mhm.
have expanded my life, not made it less.
That's gorgeous. And I think, you talked about the sort of like the romantic, like the Disney idea. I think
Yeah.
that has been a disservice to women, I think, a lot of times because there's this societal projection of like the woman's supposed to be like, first of all, waiting for this man to save her. And then by like, she has to marry before she's too old for whatever that means. And a lot of women are saying, look, I don't have a problem with getting married, but I don't want to do it right now. I do want to do some other things first. And very often women are made to feel guilty about that. I want to accomplish some things first before I can be fully engaged in someone else. And I don't think that's a bad decision either. What do you think of that?
I think that is, I have two thoughts. So, yes, like before getting married, it is nice. So, I got married when I was 27. So, by the time I was married, I had work experience. I worked at a university in the admissions department.
Mhm.
I had gone to graduate school. I had my master's degree. So, I
Yeah,
had
that's great.
things done kind of, right before
Mhm.
getting married. And I think that is kind of the thought there. But you know what? Had I met James earlier and had we got married at 22 or something, I think that would have also been fine.
Right.
And to
Yeah.
do all of those things as a married person.
Hmm.
So I think the thought, because when you're single, it's not like you don't know when you're going to meet this person. Like you don't know when your life is going to shift and the me is going to become a we. You don't know.
Mm.
And so you don't have to live in this like, oh my word, my life doesn't start until I become a we. I think
Mm.
that's the thing. So it's like, no, my life's going to continue as a me, and I'm going to do my work. I'm going to get my degree. I'm going to get that job, whatever it is. I'm going to do those things. But I think to also understand that if marriage comes along and happens during that time, that's fine. I
Yeah.
think maybe we feel like, oh, we have to achieve, like I have to have the
Mm.
house, I have to have the job, I have to have all these things, and then I can get married. But
Right.
then,
Right.
my goodness, now I'm 40 and it's like, wait a
Sure.
minute, I'm
Yeah.
too old.
And
What
we're
happened
always
to me?
chasing
Right.
something
Right.
next. Right.
So,
Yeah.
yes. So
Yeah.
I think it is okay. Follow those things that you want to pursue, but be very open to the idea of marriage at 22, 24, 26, 28, 30. Like be open to that idea, because you and your spouse, you guys can grow and do
Hmm.
those things together. You don't
Yeah.
have to have all those badges before
Hmm.
you get married.
Yeah, nope. Another great point, because that way you sort of, it's not an either or.
Yes.
It's a yes and, as they would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to
Yeah.
have that as a young bride or young couple, and still accomplish that master's degree, and still have the job at the
Yeah.
in
And
admissions. Yeah.
And I will say, being a mom is just amazing. Like, can you imagine you as a person can make another person? Like, that's kind of
Yeah,
crazy,
it is
right? Like,
fascinating. It
talk
is
about
fascinating.
productivity. It's
Yeah.
like, this is crazy. And I mean, obviously, God helps in that process. But this, it's just, I know it's portrayed as being so like, oh, it's just so a subpar to being a professional or whatever. But I am not, I'm telling you, to have a daughter, to have a son that you love, that you can talk to as they grow up. My two are in college now and one in high
Mm.
school,
Oh, wonderful.
and they become like your dearest friends. And the jokes that you think are funny, they're the first people you text, because they are going to get that it's
Right.
funny, and they're
Yeah.
your children. Like, it's incredible.
Yeah.
And what an incredible investment, because I think sometimes we think too short term, like just in the next 2 years, instead of thinking like, oh, wait a minute, I'm going to be 60 one day. I know that seems impossible to you as you're listening, but I'm going to be 60 someday. And if I just kind of discount like, this marriage family thing, that's like for the old generation,
Mm.
then I'm going to be 60 and I will have nobody underneath me. Like, that's kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't have family around me. And if my sisters and brothers feel the same way, then I don't have nieces or nephews. Like, I don't have people around me like that. In that sense, to be young enough when you marry to have children is a good thing. I had my last child when I was close to, I think I was 39, so I was 40.
Hmm.
And when I went to the kinder loop, believe me, I was like the oldest mom. I was the
Yeah.
oldest
Yeah.
mom there. And I don't mind that. But I mean, if I had, you know what I'm saying? Like, what
Yeah.
I'm trying to
Yeah.
say is, if you're young, take it, have your
Yeah. Sure.
children,
Sure.
enjoy it.
Yeah.
Enjoy it. But if you're old like me, that's fine too.
Yeah, I mean, because some people have children when they're older, and that's still they're
Yeah.
having that wonderful experience. And my mom was a young mom. She had me at 20, I guess,
Yeah.
2021, and I'm here visiting her this week. And
Oh,
yeah, so I have this. This is not normally like my studio, but I said I got to see my mom more. So I found this little nook where I was able to just record the
yes.
podcast in her home,
The mom
and
nook.
yeah, the mom nook, and with the paneling still from when I was a kid, from
I love
1982.
that. I love
Yeah,
that.
house is still 1982. But she was a young mom, and so we have a lot of fun now, because
Yeah.
um as a grown up, we have a very different relationship that's even more evolved. And now the things we talk about, it's like we kind of grew up together in a way.
Yes.
So I see what you're saying about, there's benefits to being a young parent and kind of getting those boxes checked early on as well, while you're raising your children. So another wonderful point. And my goodness, we're almost already at half hour mark here, so I can talk to you forever,
I know.
Arlene.
I can talk to you
Uh,
too, Corey.
well, thank you, thank you. Well, listen, I have two more questions for you. One is, of course, I want to bring it back to your upcoming book, Making Marriage Easier, which comes out soon. So what are some of the biggest misconceptions you are hoping to debunk in your book?
Yes. So, Making Marriage Easier, How to Love and Like Your Spouse for Life. That's the
That's the
subtitle.
full title. Yeah.
And I want to debunk this, that, you know what, if I don't have the feelings like it must be over.
Mm.
Right. Because we trust our feelings way too much. I might not feel like going to work, but somehow I go to work. You know what I mean? But I
Right.
don't think like, oh, I can't believe
Yeah.
I have to go to work.
Right,
It's like,
right.
no, you have to go
Yeah,
to work.
you have to do it. Yeah.
So, so the same way, our feelings like, oh, I think my spouse is boring. So maybe it's the end. And it's like, well, okay, don't trust your feelings, and really if you start acting like, let's say you hold your spouse's hand, you don't feel like holding your spouse's hand, but you reach across the table and you grab your spouse's hand, you give it a squeeze, and you look at them, kiss them on the cheek. You didn't feel like doing any of those things. But I promise if you do the things, you'll be like, oh, the feelings will follow, they will
Mm.
return. So I think a myth I want to debunk is like just putting way too much on feelings, and instead go back to the attitudes that brought you back in the first place. One of the key things in my book is to have fun together again,
Mhm.
because that's what brought you to marriage.
Yeah.
So fun isn't this frivolous thing like, oh, we don't have time for that. No, you must make time to do fun things together, whether it's a once a year vacation, whether it's big, or whether it's just we spent $200 and we went to the hotel downtown, whatever it is, that you still have to have those fun things. So I'd love to debunk that feeling myth. I'd also really just in the title that it doesn't have to be so hard. That what if this could be easier for you? And then what if instead of fighting against your spouse, you realize, oh, wait a minute, we are on the same team. I just recently heard this beautiful story that I think is a great thing to share with your audience. This husband was wondering like, okay, I just quote unquote won an argument with my spouse, but it doesn't feel like a win
Mm.
because she's really upset. And even though I won, it doesn't feel like a win. And he was praying about it. And he said, the God gave him like this example that when his son plays Little League, right? He was like telling his son, okay, when Travis wins, do you win? Because Travis is his teammate. And he's like, yeah. And when Travis loses, do you lose? He's like, yeah, because we're teammates. And he realized as he shared that with his wife, like we are
Mm.
on the same team. Like if one of us feels like we lost, like it's impossible. Like our whole team has to win because we are on the same side. Like you can't win and I can't lose because we are the Eagles. You know what I'm
Right,
saying?
right.
Like we are on the same team.
Right.
So having that conversation, and they called it like something like a no losers mentality or something. So every time they come to conflict, they're like, okay, we're coming from this framework of we are on the same side. Now let's figure out how to work this out in a way that
Mm.
both of us can live with and support. And it just changed, like you were talking about earlier in the podcast, the mindset, that there are no losers here. We are on the same team. So I'd love to
Mm.
debunk this myth of like we're against each other and we're in the ring and we're fighting
Right, right.
against each other, but instead like, no, we're back to back and we're fighting enemies outside, and what we're fighting together. We're like
Mhm.
fighting all the stuff around us that's trying to distract us and derail
Yeah.
us.
Wonderful words of wisdom. Very inspirational, Arlene. I tell you, I was a little nervous about this conversation. I'll be honest with you because, for a lot of reasons, which we'll get into later, maybe
Yeah.
another time. But I just, had not really examined this
Yes.
sort of construct at all with marriage. It's not something for me specifically that has
Yeah.
been, part of my realm of sort of consciousness, if you will.
Yeah.
So I want to be very conscious of how I brought it to the public, and you've just done a beautiful job, and your work is remarkable. You're remarkable, and just thank you for being with us today, Arlene, a renowned marriage and parenting expert, author, and speaker, and the host of the Happy Home podcast. It's been a delight. Thanks for being here today on
And
Motivational
thank you,
Mondays.
Corey, for taking the risk to do it. Look at you go. Thank you, Corey.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, thank you. You're very welcome. Thanks.